Welcome back to the Morgan Streetman Show. We are talking about what DeSantis has done. Governor DeSantis has done so much for our state to help us maintain during the pandemic, and how different it would be if it was under other leadership.
Yeah, well, we were talking during the break. We dodged a bullet, about 30,000 votes, and we would have had Andrew Gillum, and we'd still be, I'm sure, under lockdown. Places like Michigan are still under lockdown, and we would be too if we had a Democrat governor, because it's all part of the plan. And you'll hear that when we get into some of the State of the Union in our This Is Your President segment later. You'll hear that, and we'll help you break it down some. But before we leave Governor DeSantis, I wanted to read one other quote. I'm reading out of the Epoch Times now, which is a great newspaper, by the way, folks. If you're interested in getting a home delivery newspaper that covers national politics from a conservative angle, I'd highly recommend the Epoch Times. I know a few people who get that, and they love it. I just read it online from time to time, and but I've been thinking myself about getting the home delivery. And anyway, in that newspaper, Governor DeSantis is quoted, and he says it doesn't matter where you trace your ancestry from. We've had people that have been able to succeed in all. And here's the problem with things like critical race theory that they are peddling. They are basically saying all our institutions are bankrupt and they're illegitimate. Okay, so how do you have a society if everything in your society is illegitimate? And that's a great point. This critical race theory, which is a Marxist-Leninist technique, this is a tactic that they're applying, and it's divide and conquer. We've told that to folks before, but how do we move forward if everything in society, if white supremacy is built in, according to their what they're saying, their propaganda, their thought process, is built into the very fabric of our society? Well, we've got to destroy the entire society and start anew. And that's exactly the end they're trying to lead us to. But just to show you how confused people are getting about this stuff, and they really are getting confused, and the media is the narrative engineers, the media, they're the ones creating this. There was a study that came out as part of a report at the end of the year last year. And the surveys were actually conducted in November and December, so they addressed the year 2019. But this was a study conducted by the University of London, specifically a politics professor there. And it came out as part of a report called The Social Construction of Racism in the United States. And this study found some very interesting stuff about people's beliefs about the killing of unarmed black people. And now, just to understand, statistically, black men aged 25 to 29 are significantly more likely, actually 5 times more likely to die in a car accident than they are getting killed by a police officer using any method of force. And remember, that would include both armed and unarmed people. So that would include people actually engaged in violent armed crime who get killed. But when you study and you ask people their opinions about stuff, 8 out of 10 black people in this country respond that they believe that young black men are much more likely to be killed in a police shooting than they are in a traffic accident. Remember, it's 5 times, the reality is 5 times more likely in a traffic accident, but people's perception of reality is that they're much more likely to be killed by police. The survey got into questioning, well, how many people do you think have been killed? And a lot of people think it's 1,000 or more people were killed in the year 2019, unarmed black men killed by the police in 2019, over 1,000. But you know what the real number was? We've covered this on the show before. The real number was 9. 9 people, unarmed. Now, more people were killed who were armed, but 9 unarmed black men were killed in the year 2019. So it's a fairly rare occurrence relative to other ways of dying. So the media, though, is pushing this belief out, and people are unfortunately buying into it. And this is the belief that racism and white supremacy are running amok in our country, that there's very real, regular dangers, physical dangers from all of this. In fact, the New York Times even recently ran an op-ed saying, and we're quoting now, black people should fear for their lives when going for a jog. I mean, that's just ludicrous. That's just ludicrous. And it's interesting because the professor who ran this study, Professor Kaufman, University of London, said that the misperception of racism exists in America and has been driven by things such as critical race theory and intersectionality, that this has crept into corporate culture in America, Silicon Valley tech companies, and even into our public schools. And we just heard Governor DeSantis say that critical race theory has now been banned from Florida public schools. And I think that's a great development. That's the newsworthy piece that I wanted to get to on some of his quotations there. But I think that is a great development. And where does all of this lead? It leads to places like what we saw in Louisville, Kentucky over the weekend, where you've got people who are eating at an upscale restaurant, and then you've got rioters who come by and begin, just like we saw last summer, to start to engage with people at the restaurant. Well, these folks in Louisville weren't having any of it. And, you know, the situation almost, let's just say the situation almost got out of hand. There was one guy there who had his hands up, and he was basically saying, come on, come on. And this is a diner who's basically saying, come on, buddy, bring it. You want to fight? Let's fight right here on the patio at this nice restaurant. I'm dressed very nicely. It's perfect time to get into a fist fight on the streets with an angry mob. But people are fed up with it, right? They don't like this mob justice, mob rule that's going on. Another guy also at this restaurant, this was an older gentleman, made what I would say was a pretty ill-advised decision, but he pulled out his little pocket pistol. Now, this isn't even, it's not even a real... This isn't even like a firearm that you would want to have. This is a gun that you would not want to bring to a gunfight. It's a Derringer, right? A single shot. You can see it. There's a close-up photo of it. A single shot Derringer. And if I had to guess the caliber, I'm going to say maybe a .22 Magnum.
It looks like a gun when you fire it that a little flag is going to pop out that says bang.
And he kind of looks like Colonel Sanders, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he's going to give you, the flag's going to say, get your free chicken here. Anyway, if he pulled the trigger on that thing, and he's got it out, he's aiming it at the protesters, like, come on. Well, you got one shot. It's not very much of a shot that you got there. And by the way, if you've ever fired one of these Derringers, I mean, you might as well get an M80 and hold that in your hand and light the fuse and just hold it until it goes off, because that's about what it feels like when you shoot a Derringer. I mean, it's a terrible little firearm. Last resort firearm, and you get one shot, and this guy pulls it out, and there's a whole mob of people, including a guy who's got his own semi-automatic pistol on his waist, and you can see that in the other photo. So, I mean, you talk about an ill-advised move, but I think what it's showing is that people are fed up with this mob rule, this riot culture, this racial division, and unfortunately, this is not going to lead us to a good place. We don't want to see violence in our streets over stuff like this. And it came very close in Louisville to that happening. Now, the last thing I wanted to do was touch on Maximo Alvarez, because I got into a disagreement with a friend of mine last week who's very liberal-minded. And, you know, he was kind of saying, oh, you're always talking about this communism stuff. And, you know, that's just a bunch of nonsense. You know, my family lived through that in what's now Eastern Europe. And you know, you're on this, like, 1960s, you know, Cold War ideology. You think we're still fighting communism. And, hey, it's not just me, by the way. I mean, a lot of people think this, particularly people who've actually experienced communism in their own lives, people from Venezuela, people from Cuba. They actually believe this, and Maximo Alvarez was interviewed recently on a radio program, and he says that America has swallowed the communist poison pill. And I'm going to see if I can get this clip to run here.
They have swallowed it, they're digesting it. Listen to the media. They're no longer objective. You can tell how much they hate this country. Look at our academia. Our kids are not being, they're indoctrinated. They are taught that America is a bad country, that we're a bunch of racists, that we're bad people and we have to pay back. If this country was racist, I wouldn't be here. If this country was a racist country, most of us wouldn't be here, because even some people in your family came from another country. This country was made of immigrants. Do we have racist people in this country? Of course we do. Do we have bad people? Yes, we do. Do we have bad teachers? Yes, we do. Do we have bad police people? Yes, we do. But don't blame the country for that, because we have a justice system.
So you may recognize his voice. That was the guy who spoke at the Republican National Convention, Maximo Alvarez. Remember, he came over from Cuba, and he talked very touchingly about the story about his father telling him there is no place else. There's nowhere else to go in the world but America to find freedom. So he's not. So I'm not the only one. He's not the only one. A lot of people who have seen communism in their lives, in reality, believe that we are treading dangerously close to going and becoming a fully communist country. Thank you for listening to the Morgan Streetman Show. We hope you enjoyed what you heard, and if you did, please click like and subscribe to help us out. And remember that we recommend that you exercise your brain at least once a week.